Hey you guys, it's Peter, and welcome to my channel, Peterisms, where I tell stories of my life and just little things that I've learned as I have grown into the person that I am today. And I brought two books with me today. I didn't read the meditations, but I went in and I just kind of looked at them to see which ones would be best. Because sometimes I pull these books out and then I open it and I'm like, oh, I don't know if that's something I want to read today. So I brought A Year of Positive Thinking, Daily Inspiration, Wisdom, and Courage by Cindy Spiegel. I am loving this book. And then I also brought Journey to the Heart by Melody Beatty. We will see if we get to both of these. Let's get into this. And can you even believe it? I brought my reading glasses today. So let's get into the first meditation from A Year of Positive Thinking by Cindy Spiegel. February 4th, choose kindness over righteousness. The need to be right is an unfortunately common feeling in the human experience. The ego wants to be right. The heart wants to be kind. Act from the heart and choose kindness. There is strength in the willingness to gently surrender. When you find yourself face to face in disagreement, ask yourself these simple questions. Is being right really going to serve me in this moment? Will it fix anything? How can I instead listen with kindness and gently surrender? You may surprise yourself with your ability to choose graciously. And I so love this meditation. And the reason that I picked it is probably one of the most valuable lessons that I have learned in sobriety that all of my sponsors have said to me at one time or another, because it's something that I have really had to work on, is would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? And I think this can really apply to anything, and I think the healthier you get, and when you're like working with a counselor or a life coach or a therapist or whatever, and you've really taken some deep looks at some things, I think, this can apply to anything. Because I've had a lot of people that whenever I say this in a video, they'll say, but it's important to be right about some things. I'm at a point in my life, at 48 years old, where it's not really important for me to be right about a whole lot, if that makes sense. I don't want to argue with people. I want to have civil relationships with people. If they're people that I don't necessarily, like our personalities don't click or we don't get along, like I'd rather just be able to get along with people and be civil and say, hey, how are you? And, and I have the ability to do that, I can decide that that's who I want to be today. I don't have to have this need to be right, about things. And I think that I did for a really long time, especially I think in my youth. It was really important to me that I was right, and like you were going to know that I was right. And I almost kind of feel like it was a respect kind of thing that, like if you didn't agree with me or you wouldn't admit that I was right about something, because then it would be like, then if you would find out later that I was right, I'd be like, are you going to, like, I told you so, It was almost kind of that need, and it was, like, very much a control thing. And often before I've been trying to say often instead of a lot. Anyway, often, when I was using, I think that went along with the disease. But as I've gotten older in life, there's been a lot of situations where, I can just be, like, talking to a friend of mine, and I'll be like, oh yeah, like I saw this movie and Julia Roberts was in it. And they're like, oh no, I don't think that was Julia Roberts, I think that was Nicole Kidman. And I know for a fact it was Julia Roberts, right? And I'm just like, oh really? Well, maybe I'm wrong, I do not fight it anymore. There's no need for me to have like all of that, like it's just not even worth it. It's just totally not worth it. My battery died, so I thought that was a good spot to go back to and stop. But I just don't have that need anymore today. I don't have that need to always like argue and fight about what's right and what's not. I'd rather be happy today. If given the option of being right or being happy, I would definitely be happy, I would definitely choose happiness. And I look at, people in my life, and my mom was kind of a right fighter most of her life. And I think that's kind of a badge of honor that a lot of people wear, and I think there are moments. I'm not talking about being right in a situation of, and I want to make this very clear, okay? I'm not talking about being right in a moment of standing up for something that is correct, if that makes sense. Like standing up for your belief systems or standing up against something that you feel is philosophically wrong, okay? Or, societally wrong. I think that is important, to stand up for what you believe in and who you are. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about this incessant need that we have to let somebody know that we know more than they do, or to let somebody know that we're more informed or more educated than they are. And I've met a lot of people that are like that, and they're very lonely. Like my mom was like that. She was a right fighter, like I was saying, in everything she did. And it didn't just come to like social justice issues, of which she was a right fighter. And that is one of the things that I am the proudest of my mom, is that she was a right fighter when it came to, social issues. But that also, like went into other areas of her life. It went into her need to like argue with even just like my aunt about things like, I can remember an argument they had when we were in Chicago for my mom's 60th birthday about zero property lines in real estate. They would fight over things about recipes in, like some recipe for deviled eggs, or, do you use paprika? I mean, these are not things that you're getting into shouting matches about in a kitchen. And I think that even goes further to ask yourself, do you find yourself getting into arguments with people over ridiculous situations, over ridiculous topics and issues that really don't matter, okay? Are you going to look back on your life? I was talking to Tanya the other day, my best friend, and we love to drive around and just, have these like little sessions with each other about things. And did I just put another dead battery into this thing? Oh my God, this battery is flashing at me. Hold on a second, I'll be right back. Okay, I had to put another battery in. I don't know what I did. I just grabbed the battery off the counter, and it must have been a dead battery that I hadn't charged. But anyway, so I was talking to my best friend, my good Judy Tanya, the other day. We were driving around, and I was talking to her about an argument that I had had with somebody, and like now this is so funny because at that time, like it wasn't like this severe argument that I had, but this person was like really wanting to impress upon me that they were right about a situation, And what was so funny was, while I was telling her the story, I couldn't remember where it had started, And now, looking back on the argument, I can't even remember who it was with, which is so crazy, I really don't argue with that many people, so I don't know. I'll have to sit there and kind of look back through my history of the last couple of weeks, but it was so funny because like I'm sitting there talking to her about it. She's like, but how did it start? I'm like, I couldn't remember, And I think it's a good question. It's like, how many of these like foolish arguments do you have with somebody, I wouldn't even say any of my arguments are arguments. They're all just kind of disagreements about things, like my friends and I, we don't argue. But it's like, I'm not going to say I have never argued with my friends, but I would say like recently, like I just like, that's just not what we do. You know what I mean? And so it's interesting like that you kind of stop, you can't remember what the fight was about or whatever, and I think like, especially like in marriages, this is why it's really, really important to, I think, like just stop the little arguing and the fighting like right when it happens, because if you don't, it can turn into bigger things. And I've talked about this on here before. This is one of the things, the most valuable lessons we learned in counseling, is where like you stop having the fight and the fight starts having you. And what I mean by that is, like let's just say you've had a long day, right? And your husband or your wife comes home and it's like you expected that like the dogs would be fed or the litter box would be cleaned, or, they had like made dinner for you, or, whatever. And it's like that isn't done, right? So that's a resentment, because an unfulfilled expectation is resentment. It's when somebody, we thought they should, act a certain way and they didn't. So then it's kind of like already you're feeling bitterness, right? And then like, so they say, well, what's wrong? And you're like, nothing's wrong. What's wrong with you? And then that goes into, like this kind of like needling back and forth. And then the next day it's like, well, do you want to go somewhere for dinner? And it's like, you're still kind of feeling it from the day before, because that was never resolved, because you never said to the person, your partner, the partner, like, hey, listen, like, yeah, I was, I had a hard day anyway, and I came home and I just expected this stuff, to be able to have that conversation. And maybe your partner will look at you and say, well, you probably shouldn't have expectations like that everything's going to be done when I come home. Or maybe they'll say, like, oh, I didn't know that you felt that way. Like, maybe I can get some of that stuff done and it'll make your day easier when you come home. But it's really just about having those transparent conversations. So the next day you're talking about where to go for dinner. And I think this question is probably one of the questions that leads to most people's divorces. I really, really do. Because you start having that question and it's like, well, where do you want to go for dinner? I don't care. Okay, well, let's go to have Chinese. Well, I mean, I don't really care, but I don't want Chinese. Unless you really want Chinese. No, I mean, we don't have to go to Chinese. What do you want? I don't know. Like I said, I'll do anything. Well, you said you would do anything, but you won't go have Chinese. Well, you pick. No, I don't want to pick. Well, okay, if you don't pick though, then if I pick something, you're not going to want to do it. Okay, well, how about if we go to, you know, this place or that place? Well, I don't want Mexican and I don't want, and then it's like, it becomes this huge argument, and then that explodes into this thing, and then 3 days later, you're looking at each other and you're like, why are we even together? Neither one of us love each other. Okay, let's back up for a second, okay? That could have all been stopped if we go all the way back to this conversation that happened when you walked through the door. If you had just looked at your partner and said, I've had a really rough day today. I really can't handle anything else. And quite frankly, I probably need to go and just lay in the bed for an hour and just do nothing, you know? And by the way, I'm really hungry and I don't want to have to fix anything. Could you figure out dinner for me tonight? I would really appreciate it. That would mean a lot to me, okay? And I think the cat's litter box needs to be cleaned. You know what I mean? But like, and then your partner can look at you and say, well, no, I'm not going to do the litter box. You can do that later. But yeah, sure, I'll make you some dinner. You go take care of yourself, rest, you know? My husband comes home a lot now, and like we've gotten to the point where we have such openly transparent conversations like that he'll come home and I'll just look at him and I'll say, are you tired? And he'll be like, I'm exhausted. I'm gonna go upstairs. I'm gonna play my game Township for a little while. And I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna work on some stuff down here. You know, and then when he's been up there for an hour or he's taking a shower or whatever, I'll run upstairs and I'll say like, what do you wanna do tonight for dinner? And we kind of approach each other with a loving, calm, compassionate stance, right? Instead of like this tit for tat that happens. And I think it's really, really important that we're careful of that in relationships, whatever relationship that is, whether it's a friendship, whether it's a working relationship, whether it's a romantic relationship. I think it's really, really important that we don't do this tit for tat and, you know, that we don't take each other for granted. And I think that all goes to the point of, would you rather be happy or would you rather be right? In any situation, ask yourself, you know, it's crazy that this is kind of like, but when I was working on like paying off debt and things like that, one of the things I learned from, I think it was Dave Ramsey actually, because I read a lot of Dave Ramsey, is picking up something when you're in the store, because I would go to Walmart or Meijer with Tanya and I would just spend $100 3 times a week on crap that I didn't need. So what I was taught to do was that you start picking up a book, or like, let's say if it's a book or if it's whatever, candles. I've got so much crap that I bought back then. And asking yourself, is this a want or is this a need? Do I really need this or do I want it? And that you're allowed to have wants. If you want to buy, you can say, no, this is a want. Do you really want to spend the money on it? Yeah. But over time, what it did for me was it made me really realize that my wants and my needs are so completely different. Like it was the action that taught me that. Well, the action of asking myself in situations is, do you need to be right about this or would you rather be happy? Has, to be honest with you, probably eliminated 80% of the arguments that I used to have in my life with anybody, you know? And I think it also taught me the idea of being responsive versus being reactionary. Because back in the day, if somebody was wrong, I would want to quick tell them, no, you're wrong. You don't know what you're talking about, right? Which then would lead to aggressiveness of tone, which would then lead to anger. And I'm the one that suffers the most from that, right? Because I'm the one, you know, that like these people are renting space in my head for free. Over what? Over, oh, you think that it was Nicole Kidman, not Julia Roberts in a movie? It's stupid. It's so stupid, isn't it? So why even argue about that stuff, you know? And I think especially in our marriages, you know, in our relationships or our romantic relationships, we have to be careful of that. I think also, like, one of the most important things as parents with kids, you know, to not, like, I feel so blessed that I had 2 parents, well, and a stepmother, that never, I'm not going to say they never did it, but I would say rarely, if almost never, like, were condescending to me in a point of, like, you know, like, well, I know more than you do. You know, like, they never spoke to me that way, ever. It was always like, well, they allowed me to have my voice. Well, why do you feel that way? Well, why do you, you know, believe that to be true? But it was never like, you know, you're stupid, you know, you're talking about. I know friends of mine and I know people who had condescending family members and parents, and to this day, it's like that checks and balance in their head. Like, I'm stupid, I'm not worth it, I'm not good enough, whatever. And that is the tape that you need to throw out of your tape cassette in your head. Throw it away and get another one, you know? The fact that parents talk to their children that way, to me, is so painful. Like, I don't even understand that, you know? And I think when you're still hearing that 30 years later or 40 years later, just like the things that the bullies told me, it's like you realize really the emotional scarring that does to somebody, you know? So this was a great meditation. Okay, I know this is going kind of long, but I'm going to read. Well, it's not long, but I've been trying to shorten these because I think people like the shorter ones. February 4th, see how powerful you are. This is from Melody Beatty, Journey of the Heart. People who believe they're victims get to be right. This goes right along with what we were talking about. Each experience they have convinces them of that. They don't open themselves to the lessons, the growth, and the beauty of each situation they encounter. All they can see is their victimization. Many of us have done the hard work to shift our belief system about being a victim. As we did that, we noticed that the scenery in our lives changed. When we believe something different, we get to see something different. People who believe they have powers get to be right too. Although we know there is much in life we can't control, we also know we have the power to think, to feel, to choose, and to take responsibility for ourselves and our lives. We're discovering our creative powers and our power to love, including our power to love ourselves. We've embraced our power to grow, to change, to move forward. I need a sip of coffee, hold on. We know we have the power to claim our lives and take responsibility for ourselves in any situation life brings. Although life may deal us certain hard blows, we've learned to see beyond that. We see life's beauty, gifts, and lessons in its mysterious and sometimes magical nature. On the road to freedom, we may have made a stopover. We believed we were victims and we got to be right. Now our journey has led us someplace else. We know we have powers. We know we have choices, and we no longer need to be right, just free. See how grateful you are? See how powerful you are, and grateful, I guess, but see how powerful you are. I love that meditation. I love, the moment that you realize, like, have you ever said, like, oh, I hate when people victimize themselves, or when people make themselves the victims, and you say that, and then one day you wake up and you realize, like, you've been the person making yourself a victim for a very long time. Like, I had that moment. I had that moment of clarity where I was like, wow, for 20 years, I have made myself the victim. I'm not the victim today, and I'm going to take some of my power back. You know, I would say back in the day, if you had asked me one of my pet peeves, I would have said people that victimize themselves. People that always are like, pour me, pour me. And in recovery, we have a saying, pour me, pour me, pour me another drink. That it's always like, if you had my life, if you knew what it was like to live in my life, if you knew what all these people had done to me, if I want to tell on somebody, I want to tell everybody, I want to tell the world what this person did, I want to tell them what this person did. And it's such a place of anger, sadness, self-pity, and selfishness, and misery, just absolute misery. I do not play into that today. I refuse. If anybody comes, and I feel sorry for them, I really, really do. I have empathy and I have sympathy for people that victimize themselves, okay? It is a miserable place to be when the whole world has done you wrong, or several people have continued to do you wrong, because what you don't realize is you're allowing that person to have so much power and control in your life. Let it go. Move on. Find some other people in your life. You don't need them in your life, okay? And you don't need to tell the whole world what they did to you, because you know, and if that's your truth, then own it and move on. I don't play into that anymore because I do feel for them, right? And I do love people, and I want people to grow, whoever they are. Even if they're people that I don't get along with, I want them to grow into the best version of themselves. I don't engage in that at all today. Whenever I see a sign of that, I'm like, nope, next, done. Okay, not going to play into that, not going to respond to it. I'm not, nope. Because by enabling that, by playing into it and saying, oh, I feel so sorry for you, and I'm not talking about things like when somebody passes away, or losing a pet, or losing a job, or a major tragedy in somebody's life. I'm not talking about that kind of stuff, okay? I'm talking about people that just continue and continue and continue and continue for years on end to talk about, all the things that happened to them. I talk a lot about my bullying on here. I'm not resentful to people that did it to me today. I'm not. I've processed it a lot. I don't feel like I'm a victim of it. I feel like as a result of having gone through that, I've learned a lot of things in my life. Would I have chosen otherwise? Absolutely, because it was painful. But, I don't feel like I'm a victim of what happened to me today. I feel like what happened to me was screwed up, and I feel like it never had to happen that way, right? But I don't feel like a victim. I feel like I've taken my power back by saying, this is who I am. I'm a proud gay man today, and I don't back down from that. I'm proud of my marriage with my husband. It's probably the proudest thing I am other than my sobriety, and it's like I don't back down from that kind of stuff. So it's like you can choose to be a victim, or you can choose not to. I choose to not be a victim today. And I know, and when you can see somebody move from one stance to the other, it's like you can literally see this weight being lifted off their shoulders, because that's some tough stuff, right? When you constantly feel like the world screwed you over. And it's typically with people, you can spot them a mile away, because it's usually not just one situation, like bullying or something. It's usually every situation. Everybody is out to get me. Everybody is screwing me over. Oh, this whole group over here, they're it's a vendetta. They're masterminding to take me down. It's really? The world doesn't work that way, Do I think in some bizarre, very weird situations that's going on? Sure. But in most of our lives, no, that's not the case at all. And if somebody's bringing you that much misery in your life, get rid of that person. Okay, I'm not talking about the person that victimizes themselves. I'm speaking to the person right now that does feel victimized. Okay, if you feel that somebody or something in your life has brought you that much misery that you can't stop talking about it or getting out of your head, first of all, find some professional help to talk to, like I said, a life coach, a counselor, a therapist, whatever, to get through that, to work through that, first of all. Second of all, remove that toxicity from your life. It's not doing you any good. It's not healthy to continue to talk about. And quite frankly, I don't think people really want to hear it. Like when I kept on going on about the same things over and over and over again in my life, like my friends would just kind of be like, at some point, like, move through this and work on it, or choose to stay stuck, but I don't want to hear it anymore, and I think that's where we become toxic people to others, so I don't know, it's interesting to me. I feel bad for people that victimize themselves. The thing is, they really don't realize it until they do, if that makes sense. Like, they do come across as righteous, that, like the other book was talking about, there's a righteousness about it. I am right. If you knew what I went through, if you knew what they had done to me, let me tell you what they did. Let me tell you about this person. Let me tell you truths about. I mean, they seem so righteous. It's like they are literally ate up with what has happened, and it's sad. It's very, very sad. Because they don't really have a life of their own, and they're literally just handing their life over to other people, and it makes me very sad. So I don't engage in that today. I just don't, If people reach out to me and say, like, how do I get over this? I've just seen my truth, and I am a victim, because I was like that too for a very long time, and then I realized, I'm not going to be a victim anymore. I'm giving away too much of my life that way, and it was freeing. It was freeing when I started taking responsibility for my own life, because then I realized that I'm responsible for the outcomes of my own life too, So, it kind of goes back to, like, I can remember my mom always felt so guilty for my drinking and drugging, and she would say, I just feel so responsible for it, and, like, had I not drank when you were younger, and had I not done this, and one day we had this conversation, and I said to her, listen, you need to stop, because actually what you're doing is not fair. Because guilt, I said to her, I said, what are you gaining from this guilt that you're feeling? And she's like, absolutely nothing. I'm like, then why are you continuing to allow yourself to feel guilty for this situation? She was really victimizing herself, right? Oh, like, poor me, I was a bad mom, and now look at my kid who's a recovering alcoholic that, addict, and, like, it's just, so anyway, I said to her, I said, what's not fair about this is, if you take responsibility for everything that I did, then you are responsible too, solely for my recovery as well. And I'm not giving that to you. Like, I've worked too hard on my recovery and improving myself as a person. And I love you, but, like, that's not yours to own, okay? That's mine and my higher powers. She was like, you know what? I never realized that before. You're so right. And I think that at that moment, she allowed herself to free herself from this guilt that she felt, which guilt is part of victimization, So anyway, I love this meditation. I think it's super, super powerful. I think it's a question everybody should ask themselves, maybe like once every 6 months or a year. Like, am I victimizing myself? We all have a need to tell on somebody. We really do, right? But is your need to tell on somebody becoming like a point of obsessiveness, and it's standing in the way of you growing in life? If it is, let it go. It's not worth it. I don't cling on to stuff anymore too tightly that is weighing me down. I just don't, It's like, I just, it's like getting off of one sinking ship into another sinking ship. Throw all the junk over. I don't need it, okay? I don't need the clothes. I don't need the furniture. I don't need any of that kind of stuff. Just let the boat stay afloat. You know what I mean? Like, I want to live. And so I got to get rid of the baggage that is just not healthy for me. And if that's like ways of thinking that aren't healthy, then I need to get rid of those as well. So this is a great meditation. I loved it. And I love you guys. And I will see you tomorrow. Bye.